There's a beautiful lake just a short walk from my property, and I had the privilege of being one of the few homeowners who had private access to it. Over the years, I'd made it a point to enjoy the peaceful view and tranquil waters. It was my escape from the chaotic world, my private haven. The lake access was granted by a gated path that was strictly monitored by the HOA. That's why I was completely blindsided when I got a letter from the HOA board demanding that I hand over my key to the lake access gate. The letter read, "Due to increased community interest in lake activities and a desire for fair access to all residents, the HOA is requesting all homeowners who have private lake access to provide their gate keys for community use." I had to read it twice to fully comprehend what I was seeing. The HOA wanted me to surrender my key, the one I had legally been given as part of my property purchase? Absolutely not. The letter continued, "Failure to comply will result in fines and further action." I was furious. This wasn't about community. This was about control. And if there was one thing I didn't do, it was bow down to Karen and her HOA cronies. I showed up at the next HOA meeting, and Karen wasted no time jumping into her speech. "As part of our ongoing commitment to community accessibility," she began, "we're requesting that all private lake access be made available to all residents. We can't have certain people hogging all the good spots by the water. We've been more than generous with the space, but it's time for change." I raised my hand. "Excuse me, Karen, but that's not how this works. The lake access is private for a reason, and I'm not giving up my key. I have every right to keep that access restricted as it was when I purchased my property." Karen's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "Dean, this is about fairness. Everyone in the community deserves the same access to amenities. It's not right that you're keeping the lake to yourself." "Karen," I said, keeping my voice steady, "this isn't about fairness. It's about respecting private property rights. I don't need to explain myself to you or anyone else in this room. I will not hand over my gate key." Karen huffed, clearly agitated. "Then we'll have to take action." And just like that, the HOA board voted to impose a $200 fine every day I refused to comply. They were serious about this, but I wasn't worried. The next morning, I called Officer Diaz again. "Diaz, I need your help," I said. "They're trying to take my lake access key. They want to open the gate to all residents, which I think is illegal." Diaz's voice was calm. "Don't worry, Chief. I'll take care of it. I'll review the deed and see what we're dealing with." By the afternoon, Diaz showed up at my house, paperwork in hand. "Here's the deal," he said, flipping through the documents. "According to your property deed, the lake access is exclusive to your land. The HOA has no right to take your key, and they certainly can't fine you for it. They're overstepping." I grinned. I knew it. The next HOA meeting was a few days later, and I walked in with Diaz, who had offered to attend as my legal support. Karen looked as smug as usual, but I knew I had the upper hand. "Karen," I said, standing up, "you've crossed the line. I've reviewed the HOA's request, and it's not only unreasonable, it's illegal. The deed to my property clearly states that the lake access is mine alone, and you can't take that from me." Karen opened her mouth to argue, but Diaz stepped forward, holding up a copy of the deed. "Ma'am, if you continue with this request, we'll be filing formal complaints and legal action. The property rights are clear. The HOA does not have the authority to demand access to this land, and certainly not to impose fines or restrictions." Karen's face went white, and the room fell silent. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She clearly hadn't anticipated someone calling her bluff. I, uh, I didn't realize the deed was that specific," she stammered, clearly caught off guard. "But the HOA has always been about community." "I understand that," Diaz said, "but private property rights come first. If the HOA continues with its actions, there will be legal consequences." The room shifted uncomfortably. Finally, Karen cleared her throat. "We will retract the fine and cancel the request for your key." "Good one," I said, leaning back in my chair. "And I'll be making sure that no one in the HOA tries this again in the future." That was the last I heard from Karen about my lake access, and the next HOA meeting was a lot quieter than usual. No one dared bring up any further issues with my property. I continued to enjoy my private slice of peace by the lake, and I made sure that the HOA knew that messing with me wasn't a smart move. The moral of the story? Don't mess with someone who knows the law and someone who just happens to be the local police chief.